wanted to do, I wanted to actually do really old school, not give you any visual presentations, force you to look at me and maybe listen. I wanted to make actually 3 points. That I want to talk about new media and how basically CNN uses it. I think that's the topic. I want to make a point that there's nothing really new about new media. That's what CNN is about. That in order to stay ahead of the game, you just have to not wander from your principles as an organization like CNN, and you just have to find a way to use it, because new media doesn't change what you do, but it gives you amazing abilities to do new things as long as they're aligned with your core principles. So just want to start a little bit about new media and how, I mean, in many ways, in the broadcast industry, CNN was the new media 20 years ago. I've been there a long time as well. I've been there since the first Gulf War. And just to give you an example, how CNN actually changed how media operates. In the first Gulf War, we used a bit of equipment which we call a satellite uplink. It was revolutionary in those days. It was about 20 boxes of equipment, generators. It involved a couple of engineers. But what it did is it enabled us to provide the news live from anywhere. Now that's normal today, but 20 years ago it wasn't. Remember, 20 years ago, at least in America and in the UK as well, the news organizations, you only really got news either in the morning in the newspaper or at night in that 30-minute packaged environment. So CNN really turned that on its head and provided what we call breaking news. And I remember an incident, just to illustrate how revolutionary it was before the first Gulf War. And there were talks in Geneva between the Iraqi foreign minister, I think it was Tariq Aziz, and Baker, who was the Secretary of State. And they came out after having these negotiations to avert war, and we had a satellite dish there, and we provided the press conference live. And I remember the first words were Tariq Aziz said, "Regrettably, we haven't reached a solution." Now, that meant to everyone that there was going to be war. The State Department wasn't ready for it, because remember, we called up and said, "What's your reaction?" And said, "Well, we haven't heard from our delegation yet," because they weren't used to it. So my point is that CNN has always been a part of the new media. Now, it's been a challenge for us to obviously keep up with it, and that's what I'll get to in a second. So if you take that satellite dish, nowadays actually everyone has exactly the same with my iPhone over there. It's exactly the same. That can actually do what that satellite dish did in those days. Now you've got Twitter and all of that, and there'll be something beyond Twitter. But my point with that is that what we do basically is still exactly the same. The media is evolving, but how can we, what we've done is we've obviously tapped into all these key platforms, which I'll tell you in a minute, but we still actually do the same thing, which is tell compelling, interesting stories to people. The new platforms don't really change what we do. And I think the key point to think of ahead, which we are very much aware of, we don't know in 10 years from now how people will watch the news. We don't know. The idea that we're a television station is just something we are right now. We provide information to people, whether it's on, we have our iPad application, we have our smartphone application, we have mobile, we have web, and these things are hugely popular. If you just look at, our Twitter handle, for one, it has 10 million followers, breaking news. It's in a league with Barack Obama. On the website, we get, 21-something million users. That's on the mobile, but on digital, we get about 62 million unique visitors a month, right? That still doesn't really change. That's all, my point, that's all a delivery platform. So we've been able to, I would argue, to stay ahead because our core hasn't changed. We still have to check the facts. The Twitter is no different to us journalists than a phone call in the old newsroom from someone giving you a tip, right? Because when you think of Twitter, everyone uses Twitter, and there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of rumors. And what do? You don't believe it, really, until CNN or BBC or ABC does it. So we have to obviously develop systems to ensure that in all the clutter, we use it, but we're still trustworthy. Because, you know, I'd argue the only thing we really have, and that CNN is in the credibility business. So if we don't have credibility, we don't really have anything. So we have to keep that. But then how do you then, you know, keep adapting and not get drowned? CNN did a very clever thing years ago called iReporter. It is, they said, okay, you've got all these people with their mobile phones all taking pictures, you know, but you can't just put it on our air. Right? There's one of our competitors has a kind of slogan in the newsroom, not wrong for long, because they believe that, well, if you make a mistake, you can always correct it, but you want to be first. Our philosophy is we obviously don't want to be the first to get it wrong. I'd rather be second to get it right. So what CNN did with this iReport platform is that anyone who has an information or video, you put it there, and it becomes a community of people. I think there are 1 million registered users. You can share information. If there's a blizzard in the States, people put all their pictures on, and we divide it up into formats. But that's not CNN. It's a separate iReport, almost forum for people to interact in. But as a business, it's a great resource of video, of information. But we aren't just going to put it on our air because we don't know the facts behind it. So we do exactly that same thing as with the phone call. We have a team, editorial team, that looks at all the iReports and say, wow, this is great video. But then they need to make phone calls. They need to check its authenticity. They need to check to verify and make sure, you know, it all matches. Then once we've done that, now we're making use of this great new media platform to pull it onto our platform. And I think that to us has been a massive key to our success on that level, because it is basically everyone's a news gatherer nowadays. But you have been fooled. Yes, we have been fooled. A lot of people have been fooled, but obviously you need systems in place to mitigate against that. I think the other key thing, so on the one level, new media, we can use it to get information we don't have, but on another level, new media enables us to go further when we do a story. It becomes a platform for dialogue. If we do a story like we have a leading women, a profile on leading women, you know, that's a 4-minute segment, but the Twitter chats, the website, enables our audience to keep communicating and to kind of pull them in on that level. So I think, obviously, it's going to be, there are a lot of challenges for us in it, but as I said, the new media, you have to look at it as I mentioned in the beginning, to use it, but not let it change what you fundamentally do. And it is going to be very, very challenging, because you have a lot of pressure on you as a news organization to report faster and faster. It goes back to the Gulf War. We thought in those days it was massively fast. Now with Twitter, it's instantaneous. And I'll just relay the example from this week for the Oscar Pistorius case. Obviously massive importance, as you all know, huge for us, both for internationally and for the US market, but there aren't any cameras allowed in the court. There's no audio in the court. You can get audio of his rambling 2-hour judgment yesterday. Not rambling, no, it was very good. It just went on a long time. So the trick is, as a news organization, everyone's used to live pictures. South Africa works a little differently. So this really became a courtroom Twitter coverage in a sense. We had reporters in there tweeting, and we would then obviously take that information and relay that. So it was kind of it was an odd mix of old-fashioned or lack of technology and how we used Twitter to push the story forward. And I think that to me is kind of how we're going to keep going. There were a lot of people on Twitter who got it wrong. And also it's very limited in that court, by the way. That court, there were only complete lack of organization, because there were 10 seats available to about 400 journalists. And you do the math, and journalists aren't the most polite people. When it's a matter of if someone's sent around the world to cover it and you aren't allowed in, there wasn't a setup. Most courts would have an overflow facility to monitor it. On the second day, they set it up, but it wasn't working. So you still had this massive crush. So we were quite lucky. We sent someone there at 5 in the morning to get in and to still elbow and still argue and fight. But there were only, you know, for a story of this significance, there were only about, I think there were 10 journalists in there covering it. And then, you know, the key was to use that, to try and keep a 24-hour audience that wants instantaneous stuff engaged. I think that was the challenge, and that was a good marring of old and new technology. But I think, you know, that's what I talk about. I'm open to any questions or any discussion on that. But I think with new media, as I said, we don't know what the platform in the future will be. But I think for a company like CNN, we're still going to do the same thing. And that it really is the new platforms, and often the new media is in many ways the delivery platform. So, thanks.